Okay, we're running a bit late. At 6:32. Can we please start the meeting? Thank you. Thank you. Always wanted to do that. Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City's Public Agenda Briefing Forum. My name is Councillor Brooke O'Donnell and I will be chairing this forum. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on, the Whadjuk Noongar people. Wish to acknowledge their elders past, present and future and respect their continuing culture and the contribution.
Excuse me, Chair. Apparently there's no sound out there. The audience can't hear us.
Sorry.
Technical support.
You can read now. I mean, you can hear. Oh, great. That was easy. Thank you. They make to the life of this city and this region. The operation of this forum is in accordance with the city's adopted public agenda briefing forum policy and procedure and is governed by the provisions of the Local Government Act, standing orders and rules of conduct. This agenda briefing forum will provide the opportunity for elected members to be equally informed and seek additional information on matters prior to the presentation of these items to the next ordinary meeting of council for consideration and decision. And I thank you for your attendance and interest. So we'll move on to attendance, apologies and leave of absence.
Through the Chair, we have apologies from Councillor John Giardina, Councillor Cameron Blair, Councillor Janelle Sewell and Councillor Sue Billich.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest?
Through the Chair, I have not received any tonight, councillors.
Okay.
What?
Thank you.
That's empty.
No. Announcements by the member presiding. I have no announcements. Now, public question time. We do have quite a few questions and deputations. However, given that they're in reference to potentially the presentations by the staff, we will leave that till the agenda. So, assuming that there is no other questions, we will carry on. Public statement time. Same thing goes for that. We'll have some statements at 10.1.1, the proposed amendments to existing local structure plan, and also 10.1.2 we will have numerous presentation and questions for the Forrestfield High Wycombe Stage 1 review. Do we have any public submissions received in writing?
Through the Chair, no.
No petitions. And we have confidential items, 9.1 and 9.2. However, if we don't relay any of the confidential information, we can just make reference to the additional items. Otherwise, we will move behind closed doors. So we'll move on to point 10, reports to council. So the first item is 10.1.1, proposed amendment to existing local structure plan. The presentation by Andrew Fowler-Tuck.
Good evening, councillors, members of the public. The item I'm presenting on tonight is item 10.1.1, proposed amendment to existing local structure plan, mixed use to a split mixed use commercial designation. So the purpose of this report is essentially to consider the amendment to the Wattle Grove Cell 9 structure plan prior to making a recommendation to the WA Planning Commission. So council will need to consider whether to support the proposal as proposed, support the proposal subject to modifications, or not support the proposal and provide reasons as to why. Essentially the details of the proposal are that it is proposing to change the land use designation on a portion of lots 192, 193 and 194, numbers 326, 318 and 310 Hale Road, Wattle Grove, from mixed use to commercial. The general result of the amendment would be that lots would change from 100% being mixed use under the adopted structure plan to approximately a 50% split of mixed use and commercial. In essence, the commercial designation allows for greater land use permissibility, importantly shops or retail, which provides greater flexibility for the developer. Importantly, the application has been supported by a comprehensive planning report and also a retail needs assessment. Just to provide some context for councillors, you can see on the screen the three lots in question, which is 32, 31 and 30. They essentially is the mixed use currently under the adopted structure plan. 34 and 33 is a designated commercial area under the adopted structure plan, which currently has the Aldi shopping centre on 34. You've got the 7-Eleven petrol filling station on 33. 32 is currently vacant. 31 and 30 are currently the former Teresa Green site, which is now being vacated. The green areas to the rear are public open space. With respect to consultation, it was advertised with 100 letters going out to occupiers within 100 metres radius of the subject site. In total, 9 submissions were received from the 2 advertising periods, 6 objections and 3 non-objections. The concerns raised were in essence related commercial viability, traffic impact and residential amenity. With respect to the city's assessment, it was considered that the proposal was generally consistent with the planning framework and represented a logical extension of the adjoining commercial land uses. As I mentioned earlier, a retail needs assessment has been provided by the applicant, which has demonstrated a future demand for additional retail floor space as the population grows, both within the immediate catchment and also with the broader catchment area. The proposal is not considered to be an out-of-centre development. Some of the concerns raised in respect to specific amenity impacts, such as traffic, site layout, building design, it is considered can be dealt with at the more appropriate development application stage of the planning process. So in conclusion, the recommendation is that Council recommends to the WAPC that they support the structure plan amendment as currently proposed. Any questions?
Councillors, are there any questions? Okay, I will take that. Pardon? Yes, we do have 2 deputations, so maybe we will just wait until the deputations come and then see if councillors got any other questions, but thank you. So first we've got Regan Cake, who's giving a deputation.
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors and City Kalamunda officers. My name is Regan Cake from Dynamic Planning and Developments, and we are the applicants for the proposed structure plan amendment before you tonight, which was lodged on behalf of our client, Mr Kim Soo, who owns 310 and 318 Hale Road. As the applicants for the amendment, we have worked closely with the City's officers for many months and are fully supportive of the officer recommendation for approval, as we consider that this will be a positive catalyst for development on a site that has remained stagnant for many years. The reason for the deputation tonight is to provide an overview to councillors of the amendment and to address some of the concerns raised through the submission period. As is outlined in the officer report, the proposed amendment seeks to change the land use designation for a portion of 310, 318 and 326 Hale Road in Wattle Grove. The result of the amendment will be that the lots change from a 100% mixed use land use designation to a 50% mixed use and 50% commercial land use designation. In the context of the structure plan area and the surrounding development, this change is considered to be quite minor, as there is only a limited number of additional uses that would be capable of approval. In addition, the amendment simply represents an extension of the existing commercial land use designation further along Hale Road. With regard to the submissions raising objections to the proposed amendment, as outlined in the report, there are sort of 4 key concerns. The first is the impact on existing retail providers. I won't speak too much on this one. We've got Dawson, a colleague of ours who worked on the retail needs assessment, here to provide some information on that. But it effectively illustrated that sufficient capacity exists for additional retail floor space in this area should it be desired. The second and third concerns were an insufficient consideration of traffic impacts and points of vehicle access. These two concerns are both traffic related, and whilst it is acknowledged that a supporting report hasn't been provided at this stage, it isn't considered necessary given the minor nature of the amendment. This is evident in that the approved road network is not being modified, and the site is already capable of being developed for commercial purposes. It is noted that both of these concerns will be examined in greater detail at the development application stage when a traffic impact assessment will be provided. The final concern related to a lack of integration with existing development on Hale Road. The proposed amendment relates to an extension, of the existing commercial land use designation on lots that remain undeveloped. It is considered that at the development application stage, integration with this adjoining development can occur seamlessly. It is considered that the concerns raised during the advertising have either been appropriately addressed through the retail needs assessment or will be addressed at the development application stage. In this regard, the proposed amendment is considered appropriate for approval and will act to facilitate redevelopment of a tired site along Hale Road that is a bit of an eyesore and has been for years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Stallard?
Yes, thank you, through the Chair. Considering there's been some community concern about the commercial impact, and I know, as stated in here, and you've intimated that we have no say over whether there's competing uses or not and what they are, but I'm just wondering, do you have a scope or some guideline to what you think would be or could be possible for the site in commercial base?
At this stage, as we sort of said, there's no real defined development concept or uses or anything like that being considered at this stage. Our client is in discussion with an aged care provider, potentially that to the rear of the site on the existing mixed-use portion. On the commercial side, it's more looking like allied health, pharmacy sort of stuff. But yeah, there's nothing locked in by any means, and the framework to an extent doesn't really exist for that at this stage.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much for taking the time to give your deputation.
Thank you.
I will now call Dawson Demasiet Hunning, who will also give a deputation.
Sorry. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, and city staff. My name is Dawson. I'm here representing Praxis. We undertook the retail needs assessment for the subject site. The analysis that we undertook assessed the equity of access to shop retail floor space for the Wattle Grove North catchment. A gap was identified in shop retail floor space of approximately 3,900 square meters currently, growing to approximately 6,200 square meters in future. I will note that we sent through a presentation this afternoon and there was a typo in the graph regarding the future floor space. So we will forward through an amended version of that afterwards. There is an opportunity to provide convenient, high quality floor space where it is needed by changing zoning from mixed use to commercial at the subject site, allowing for shop retail uses. The community benefits stemming from this change include greater diversity of convenience offering for residents, a reduction in the travel burden for local residents, and supports walkable catchments as per State Planning Policy 4.2, and high quality retail adjacent to a proposed aged care facility that provides amenity for a growing demographic with limited mobility. Our findings indicate that the proposed rezoning of the subject site will help address an identified gap in the provision of retail floor space. They will provide a more even allocation of growth in catchment expenditure across the activity center network. They will generate greater community benefit with no impact to the activity center hierarchy. They will enhance the ability of Wattle Grove North in achieving its purpose as a neighborhood center and delivering for the daily and weekly shopping needs of its catchment. And with further considering the current climate, it could potentially assist in the city's recovery from the COVID pandemic by generating construction and operational jobs should it progress the development of the property. I'd like to thank you for your time, and are there any questions?
Councillors, any questions? Okay. If there's none, thank you very much for your deputation and your time. So the next item we have on the agenda is 10.1.2, Forrestfield High Wycombe Stage 1 Industrial Area. It's a presentation by Peter Varellis.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. My eyesight's not the best, so I'll be referencing my laptop here for the purposes of the presentation. Second item on the draft agenda for this evening from Development Services is the review of the Forrestfield High Wycombe Industrial Area Stage 1 Development Contribution Plan report. This item was presented to Council at the February Ordinary Council meeting for the adoption for the purposes of public advertising. The purpose of the report is to consider the submissions received from the advertising period over the March and April months of 2020 and to adopt the DCP report and applicable rate at this stage at $22.43 per square metre. Background to this item is the DCP for the area has been active in the area since 2012. It has been revised in the context of changes to the broader planning framework for the Forrestfield North High Wycombe South area. Some contributors have raised concerns with changes in rates over a number of years as a result of detailed designs progressing and particularly utility service infrastructure costs being refined through those detailed designs. And the city, as part of that process, has sought detailed legal advice, and in light of that legal advice has made necessary adjustments to the operation of the DCP. The detailed legal advice is provided as a confidential attachment to the item for the benefit of councillors. In terms of the details of the report, a comprehensive report has been prepared by the city's administration, and that is available and open to the public and councillors. It is comprehensive and runs through a significant number of issues. I will touch on those issues as part of this presentation, however they are explored in great detail throughout the report. The details of include the calculation approach that has been revised, and that's outlined within the details of the report. It has also reviewed key inputs in relation to infrastructure and the considerations associated with those infrastructure items. These include, but are not limited to, the composition of remaining infrastructure items, which have been revised through further detailed engineering designs, key infrastructure considerations in light of the timing of development approvals and infrastructure needs of the development area, namely the Nardine Close extension around the Bush Forever site and the nature of the detailed design for Milner Road and Sultana Road West. It also accounts for recent land valuations for the purchase of any land required for infrastructure. Previous DCP reviews had a land rate of $220 per square metre. That was revised for the purposes of public advertising to $240 a square metre, and most recently, the most recent land valuation indicates that land is in the order of $250 per square metre in the subject area, and that's reflective of recent sales and a verified land valuer's approach in terms of that land valuation output. The DCP report has had regard for the timing and priority of infrastructure that's remaining to be built, and those are outlined in the relevant section of the DCP report. Through the submission process, the city received 6 objections and 2 comments. The key issues that arose through those submissions received were in regards to the calculation approach, the apportionment of infrastructure, the timing of future refunds that may come about as a result of changes in the contribution rate over time, and requests to remove infrastructure items in light of recent development approvals, namely the Hare Krishna place of worship on Sultana Road. The recommendation, having regard for all the details and information contained in the council report, the advertising process and the submissions received, and the particulars outlined in the confidential attachments, namely the legal advice, council is recommended to adopt the cost contribution rate of $22.43 and note the various submissions received. Do I have any questions from councillors?
Questions? Councillor Connor?
Madam Chair, at this point in time, I just want to flag that I've got an alternate motion, a draft alternate motion for this item. And my question to you, Peter, would be, do you know what the new rate would be if my motion was adopted by council?
Through the chair, based on a preliminary calculation undertaken that is still subject to finalisation and being presented at the OCM, it's in the order of $20 to $21 per square metre.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions? No? Well, I note that we do have some deputations and questions from the community, so we will get on with them. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, councillors.
Call it Matthew Reid, who's got a deputation.
There we go. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, councillors. My name's Matthew Reid. I'm a partner from the law firm of Jackson McDonald. I'm acting for several landowners in the city's district who are impacted by the DCP, and what we understand is a new approach or a new interpretation to the DCP that the city is now taking. The first landowner that I act for obtained a planning approval in March 2020, and condition 2 of that planning approval purported to pick up the requirements of the DCP as per the city's new interpretation. And that condition refers to concepts such as final contribution rate, interim cost contributions and interim contribution rates. The DCP makes no provision for those sorts of concepts. Further, there was a condition attached on the planning approval that the landowner enter into an agreement with the city to secure payment of an interim cost contribution and a final cost contribution. Again, the DCP makes no express reference to such an agreement. I also act for several other landowners who have already developed their land and have paid their cost contribution, and they have now been informed by the city that, contrary to what they understood was a final payment, at some point in the future they will be required to most likely top up their payment, and they are unclear at the moment as to what that final amount will be. And again, the express provisions of the DCP don't provide for these sorts of top-up payments. The city can amend the provisions of the DCP, and it can amend the provisions to provide for these sorts of things. But to do so, the city has to go through the proper procedural steps that are required to amend a local planning scheme. And that's what the Planning and Development Act says. The fundamental point I'd really like to leave council with tonight from my submission is that very point about the fact that there is a formal process that is required to be undertaken to amend the DCP. And it's interesting to note that the city actually did do that back in May 2018. And if you have a look to Schedule 12 to your planning scheme, you'll see that in respect of some of the provisions there, there's a little reference to a government gazette and a reference to the amendment. So the city did follow the proper process back in May 2018. And at that time, the city properly amended the cost contribution formula to include the defined term that the city now says should be ignored. If you go back and look at the DCP report from 2018, the city talks about that particular amendment and says that the amendment and the inclusion of that definition in the formula was required to add clarity to the DCP. Now, a year and a half later, the city is saying that the inserted definition should be ignored. Now, leaving aside why the city now states that it should be ignored, the question that does arise then is, well, if the city had to undertake that particular formal process back in 2018 to amend its DCP, why is it not doing so now? It's my client's submission that the city can't simply decide to reinterpret the DCP and ignore defined terms in a formula or read words into the DCP to implement an interim cost contribution process and a security of method process when the DCP does not expressly provide for these things. Rather, the city has to amend the DCP to give effect to these things, and the amendment has to be done according to the legislated process. And again, I just reiterate, that's the takeaway point I'd like to leave council with tonight. If the city doesn't take that particular approach, then it would be open to disgruntled landowners to make an application to the Supreme Court to seek a declaration that the city's interpretation is unlawful. And that could happen. And we would request that council take into account what I've said tonight and take that into account in their decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions? No? All right, thank you very much. Now we have Robert Celius, who has a question, I believe. No. So then we've got Leisha Mikota with a question? No? Okay. David Downing with a deputation?
Evening, David Downing, 107 Milner Road, High Wycombe. I'd like to point out, first of all, that tonight's document is not the same as the one that was put out for public comment in February. I love reading these DCP reviews. It's just like opening a new box of chocolates every time. So tonight I've only brought 3 little treats out of a full box. First one's a milk chocolate, Berkshire Road. Several submissions suggested that the shared path be located on the north side of Berkshire Road is now redundant as a consequence of funding that has been made available for a 3 metre wide principal shared path on the south side of Berkshire Road to connect the station to Forrestfield. As a consequence of this new path being built on the south side of Berkshire Road, instead of removing the shared path item from the DCP, the city says, in anticipation of construction funding being provided for this project, the city has amended Berkshire Road to remove the shared path item and instead include the completion of and necessary repairs to the existing 2 metre wide footpath to fulfil the intent of the local structure plan. In other words, nothing changes except the name of the path. As a result, there'll be a blatant waste of $87,000 of DCP funds on a totally unnecessary duplication of paths. This is bureaucracy out of control. It will result in 5 metres of paths along a 9 9-metre road. The next delight's a strawberry cream. Report items 22 and 23 state, a key area of concern raised through submissions received during advertising of the DCP report was that the city's interpretation of Local Structure Plan 3 to disregard certain words in the method for calculating contributions would require an amendment to the LPS 3 public advertising and ultimately the approval of the Minister for Planning through a scheme amendment. In this regard, the City has been advised that the approach adopted does not constitute or require an amendment to the LPS 3. Further detail of this aspect is contained within confidential attachment to the benefit of the Council. The City will not tell us where this advice comes from. The WAPC does not say an amendment is unnecessary. Their advice is, should a review identify an interpretation or application of policy principles that is inconsistent with current DCP arrangements, local governments may consider initiating a planning scheme amendment. They will then be processed as a complex planning scheme under amendments to the Planning and Development Regulations 2015, required to be advertised and considered by WAPC and determined by the Minister. Until January of this year, there was no suggestion to any of the landowners who had paid their contributions prior to that time that payments were only interim, and no agreements were entered into with those landowners to reflect that. If that had been the case, the two landowners who have taken action against the City for refunds would not have needed to do so. This aspect was not part of the motion 281 of 2019 concerning letters to be sent to Coxon Group and MEM Properties. And why is it now necessary for new developers to acknowledge that the contributions are only interim and a new agreement with the City? It was not necessary in the past. This is clearly a change of interpretation and application of policy principles that requires a scheme amendment. Let's see what the next little treat is. It's one of my favourites, a peppermint cream. And I'll just put a footnote here that late this afternoon I was notified that there have been some changes made to the proposed motion, which we've just heard about. However, I would like to continue reading my pre-prepared submission because irrespective of some of the outcomes, the process has been flawed. Milner Road. Until last Thursday, the local structure plan showed Milner Road was to be upgraded to allow for RAV7 36.5 metre road trains between Berkshire Road and Nardine Close, and RAV4 27.5 metre road trains from Nardine to Saldanha and along Sultana Road. This report says that this is no longer the case and Milner Road beyond Nardine Close and Sultana Road will only allow for as-of-right vehicles or standard semi-trailers that are legal on every street in WA. The footpath in Berkshire Road has to stay because it's in the LSP, but this LSP item can be changed on a whim. Why has this occurred? Why has the change occurred? The City says this change is with the view to minimising unnecessary infrastructure costs. Do you now have a conscience because you've just wasted $87,000 duplicating a footpath in Berkshire Road? Or the cost overrun of more than $600,000 on the Nardine Ashby link? Or the addition of Road 1 at a cost of $2.3 million because it may be required in the future because of increased traffic from the station? Or the $106,000 on a bush forever fence that someone from Lands, Planning and Heritage expects us to reimburse even though they've owned and fully fenced the site for 21 years? How did this change come about? Its report says, prior to completing the 85% design process, the City surveyed existing and approved industrial operators who front onto these sections of road. This process confirmed that none of the businesses currently require or will require in the future access for larger RAV vehicles beyond the as-of-right standard 19-metre semi-trailer. Accordingly, the design reflects the current and future access needs. You surveyed the industrial operators, not the property owners. Two of these industrial operators are lessees. You surveyed only the 5 already developed properties, or did you? I spoke to my approved industrial operator, landowning neighbour, one of the 5, and he knows nothing about the matter. It never entered your heads to survey the owners of the remaining 10 undeveloped properties, the same ones you are hoping and expecting will develop before the end of the scheme in 2.5 years' time. You never asked the landowner who already has 2 road trains parked on his property most nights, do these owners get less consideration than someone who rents a property? What, you don't know my phone number or my email? You don't know where I live or where to find me on every second Tuesday night? This report said the changes to the operation of DCP are in the interests of equity for all landowners. This report and the submission responses must use the word 200 or more times. Equity. Since last Thursday, the City has reduced the value of my properties by several $100,000 each by severely limiting transport access to my future logistics warehouses. At the same time, you are demanding that I pay a higher contribution to the DCP than I'm currently required to in order to contribute to equity for the other 29 landowners who have already got the infrastructure in place that allows them unlimited RAV7 access and the increased land value that has followed. Please show me where the equity is in all that. I'm starting to feel unwell. It must be all the chocolates I've eaten the last few days. Before I go, can I please acknowledge the work of Councillor O'Connor in assisting to resolve some of these issues without even needing to be lobbied. He has substantial understanding of the scheme and I thank him for his work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Downing. Would just check if there's any questions for you before you leave. Peter Fellis, would you?
Through the Chair, I'd just like to provide Mr Downing some clarity in terms of some of the statements made. I won't address the Berkshire Road footpath. I'll defer to my colleague, the Director of Assets, but I will discuss the interim arrangements and Milner Road design. In terms of the interim arrangements, the City has received comprehensive and senior legal advice, which is a confidential attachment, and the City's approach reflects that. In terms of Milner Road, the City has been in liaison with the operators, and the City's administration did undertake a consultation process, which we've documented. We also engaged with Main Roads WA. And in engaging with Main Roads WA, particularly around your holdings at Front Milner Road, the advice that we received through the engagement with the Heavy Vehicle Operations Unit is that if you're able to demonstrate turning movements for RAV4 vehicles within your site, they can consider RAV4 applications for your site, irrespective of the design changes that are proposed. So your property that fronts Milner Road, with the design that is proposed at the moment under the DCP as an officer recommendation, still has the capability and capacity to have RAV4 vehicles entering and exiting the site, so long as you can demonstrate on your property or the property adjacent to which you have an interest in that they can maintain vehicle movements within your property in and off Milner Road. So the proposed designs wouldn't impact particularly your site for turning movements in and out of Milner Road.
Thank you, Director. Would there be any other questions? Director for Asset Services.
Thank you. Through the Chair and to Mr Downing, if you'd like to just listen. The comments made regarding the footpath on Berkshire. In the report, as we've noted, we had and still have Western Australian Bicycle Network funding support to undertake the design only on the shared path on the south side of Berkshire, consistent with the planning. We don't have construction money and grant funding for that project. So the DCP at this point in time needed to preserve the minimum amount of funding necessary to provide a footpath on Berkshire if we did not receive funding to proceed with the south. And that's why the northern footpath repairs and extensions are set in the DCP at this point in time. Of course, as we get closer to the conclusion of the DCP, we will know more certainty regarding construction money for the south and potentially be able to delete the footpath on the north from the works program. You will note also in paragraph 76 of the report, it sets out the order of batting for construction activities to include the project, the DCP, and the footpath is way down the bottom of towards the bottom of the list. So it is trying to recognise timing of any funding support to construct the southern path, if that helps you in that analysis.
Thank you. Sure.
My reference was the government bike funding program, which states for next year that the $370,000 is committed, which I took to see as being...
That's not quite correct. It's actually an application live for 21-22. We have not got the results of that, and we have not yet adopted even the council budget for capital works for 21-22 at this point.
There's a conflict of information.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions, did we have a question from Stuart Burney?
Mayor, councillors, my name's Stuart Burney. I'm owner of lot 308, 166 Sultana Road. My house is at the end of this temporary cul-de-sac. The temporary cul-de-sac's mentioned in the report. Where are we? I think it's 69 or around the 60s. It's in regard to the extension of stage 2, Nardine Close. There's mention that whether the road goes through lot 51 or whether it's removed from the DCP and the cul-de-sac is left as is. It's termed as temporary. Actually, half of it is on my land, which the original contract was signed in 2016. So we're in mid-2020 and we still haven't sorted it all out yet. So the DCP has purchased a strip of land along one side, and half of the cul-de-sac is actually on my land. So when it says temporary, it's actually sitting on my land. So that's affecting me using that land, and it puts a whole lot of indecision on selling, which is what we want to do. We just want to get out, have somebody develop the site. You know, I don't want to say it too loud, but get out of the shithole, because it's really bad things going on there, and this has been going on for, many, many years. Yeah, so my main point is in the review, it's been noted that lot 51, there's a proposal to develop for the Hare Krishna's place of worship, and I believe that's been approved as a development. As landowners at 51, also lot 52, it's now lot 308, we have not put any objection to this place of worship going in, and as my understanding is that lot 50 is being zoned mixed use and not industrial, light industrial. So it all makes sense for me for this place of worship to go in. I think it's a good idea because there's a buffer between the proposed residential and the light industrial. I'm opposed for the road extension, the 2A, which is extension stage 2 to go around the back of lot 51 and service lot 50. Currently, the as the point is made in lot, what is it? I think it's 69 or one of those, that the development is proposed to go ahead, and it will not require the extension to stage 2. And I'm a backer of that, because I would just be happy for it to be left as is. Now, there's a note in there that the city will not back the removal of stage 2 extension, because they have a concern that this proposed place of worship may not happen, even though they've given it development approval. So, may not happens, and could be this, maybe in 18 months' time, is not good for people who want to plan and with families. They need to move on. They need certainty. We've waited for this. This is sort of this place of worship has put some sort of certainty on things, and then things can get sorted out. Currently, I have a driveway that's separated from the cul-de-sac, so I've got one strip of land which is on the title 308, and then I've got another strip of land, title 308, on the other side of the roundabout, and then I've got half of a cul-de-sac which I don't know what's going to happen. So, you know, if you're a developer and you're buying a land, is that a good situation? Not really. And this has been on the go since 2016. So all these little things build up and they get a bit annoying, but I think we're going down the right path, but I just cannot understand why there is this push for a risk that lot 50 will need access at some stage if the development proposal doesn't get constructed and the Shire has already approved it. So I'm meant to sit here and wait while they build their house before we can get our situation sorted. So I really, you know, I've been in meetings and I've been very cooperative, and I've never thrown up any barriers to any of these developments. We've just let it all go through because we know all the lots need access, the road has to be there, you know, but just sort it out. This cul-de-sac is going to get sorted, and, you know, the comments for this cul-de-sac being temporary and being finished off and made permanent, there's a list of things that are needed, and you know, there's barriers for the house. So we've got a cul-de-sac here now with no barriers for the house. It says it needs emergency access way. So this road's been built for a year with a cul-de-sac with no emergency access, but my driveway has been the access for the whole community. But stage 1, which is constructed now, is meant to have a cul-de-sac, because it just says here that if it's going to become a permanent cul-de-sac, which is what it is now, it's going to need emergency access. But none of that has been purchased, none of that's been sorted out. It's all been pushed to the side, and we've got a road in there. So, yeah, all I'm asking for is just that to back the original idea of this cul-de-sac being permanent, and the land to be sorted out that it's on, so then we know what's going on as far as what's getting done with that land. And the other issue is that currently we've got a cul-de-sac there, which the Shire, well, the DCP owns a certain strip of it, and then that does not allow any access or minimal access for the property, lot number 151. And I made a submission about this, and it's been interpreted the wrong way, that there's a problem with access and the cul-de-sac has to be moved. No, you just got to purchase the land, and then there'll be plenty of room for a crossover for 51. So Yeah,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burney. I'm just going to see, oh, did you want to ask Councillor O'Connor a question?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Burney, for your presentation. So this afternoon I circulated a draft alternate motion that has the effect of making permanent the current temporary cul-de-sac and deleting the extension of 2A up to lot 51. Is that, would you be happy with that?
yeah, that was what my submission,
Yep.
and pretty well my submission said that, the emergency access should have been part of stage 1 and not thrown into stage 2, and that making that permanent would allow everything to get sorted and
That's right.
cleared up rather than having uncertainty. So
Yeah, and just to make you aware also, with 2A being removed, then that making permanent that cul-de-sac would be the first priority on the list.
hey, well, that'd be good. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Was there any other questions? Did either of the directors want to add anything further? No? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Burney, for your
Thanks a lot.
So that is the end of the questions and submissions that we have. So we will move on to the next item. So it's 10.2.1, and I believe we have a declaration of interest. Is that right? Yep.
Through the chair, yes. I've received a declaration from Councillor Billich. Councillor Billich is now present. She's not an apology. So if the minutes could note that when she arrived, declaring an interest on item 10.2.1 Kalamunda Functional Road Review, declaring a direct financial interest as she has an interest in 2 properties on that road. Thanks.
Okay, and Councillor Billich has left the room, so we have a presentation by Director. Brett.
Thank you, Chair, councillors, members of the community and staff. The report I'll be presenting tonight is from our asset planning team. Unfortunately, the manager has gone for a long walk down Albany some way and decided I could stand in his shoes tonight. So we're talking about tonight is the adoption of the layout, the master layout for Kalamunda Road between Roe Highway and Abernathy Road. Just to recap for councillors, we started this project last calendar year, and in July last year, council made a determination of the 2 options presented. They would prefer a lower capacity Main Street as the preferred outcome for this road. That culminated earlier this year in some concept designs for the road layouts, which council endorsed for the purposes of community consultation, which is now the subject of this report. So if you could move forward, please. Oh, I've got a clicker. What a lucky boy. So the purpose of the report is to recap what we found during community consultation, to also recap for the community and the council what the designs look like and the rationale for undertaking the project. Stage 1 of the community consultation was basically high level, just to gauge the community's view as to the look and feel of the 2 options being presented in terms of capacity and potential layouts. And it was clear that the community and the council would prefer this lower capacity main road concept. So through the stage 2 modelling that was undertaken by our consultants, they were talking to get a target capacity of 15,000 vehicles per day. They had special software to give a macro modelling overview of intersection demand and traffic flow. And the modelling indicated that with the ancillary works surrounding Kalamunda Road live at the moment, being Roe Highway, Great Eastern Highway Bypass and Abernathy Road, that there would be a preference in this capacity to shift a lot of vehicles off Kalamunda Road that would normally use Kalamunda Road. The designs, one of the key issues, of course, would be trying to minimise land acquisition because that's a cost that adds to the project, and provide much better amenity for pedestrians and cyclists. So we undertook and sought community views on various cross-sections, which are through these slides here. I will point out that there is a typo on the layout for this Cyril to Rangeview Road cross-section. It does show a 2-metre carriageway or traffic lane. We thought that was a bit cheeky. It is a typo. There's plenty of roads, so it's a standard 3-metre road carriageway that was in there. Okay, so in our thoughts at the moment, subject to adoption of the plan, we would seek grant funding through the Metropolitan and Regional Roads Group improvements funding, which we usually don't use this undertaking road improvements. We use a lot of it for road rehabilitation, which is a separate fund, and over the sort of next 15 years plus undertake the works set out in the concept plans. Of course, they're very much subject to, as we do each budget, funding availability and council disposition to adopt any plan for that year. So getting back to the community consultation, we undertook it through late April, early May. Although we received only 29 responses to the survey and 1 written submission, which is now on each councillor's desk, the strong support was 62% support for the concepts, on top of the 224 that originally responded to our Kalamunda Road concept planning. So our feeling is that we do have a representative sample of community views on the project. The community engagement report is attached to this report for further information if council wish to get into the detail. And just for council's information, because I'll take the opportunity to outline what future road reviews we might want to have council consider. And these, of course, are subject to funding, approval and the circumstances at the time. So we started our journey with Kalamunda Road, Road to Abernathy. We now want to consider taking it Kalamunda Road up the hill to the town centre, Canning Road from the town centre out to Pomeroy, Les Murdy Road for its full length, Horton and Hale, and then finally Berkshire. So that's the sort of thinking at the moment for future road reserves, which are road reviews, the sort of $80,000 per project type concepts. Of course, if councillors wish me to undertake another review of another major road, quite happy to put it in the program. So, in essence, we're proposing that council adopts the functional review and upgrade plan as the basis of design going forward, as set out in the attachments to this report. Are there any questions I could help the community? Oh, yes.
Through the chair, Brett, I noticed in the written submission, obviously we only received it tonight, it talks about 6 roundabouts in 2 kilometres, and that there was no mention of this in the, and maybe wrong, I didn't see the survey, there was no mention of this in the survey. Is that correct, that they're talking about 6 roundabouts in 2 kilometres, or is that just incorrect?
It's probably in the right order of what's in there, and they were set out in the survey, the number of roundabouts that were going forward. These provide, when they're required, based on the traffic model, to handle the intersection traffic volumes in a safe manner, rather than just T sections or 4-way sections. The work shows none of the traffic modelling quantified or justified going to traffic lights anywhere in the section of Kalamunda Road, but roundabouts were seen as an appropriate traffic management process and outcome to safely move vehicles through each intersection.
So, Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you. Brett, the fund that we don't normally access, the improvement fund, how does that compare to our success with the rehab fund that we apply for and receive money for?
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor, for that question. The way the improvement fund, much like the rehab fund, is set up, each council is given a notional allocation of what they can apply for if they wish to apply for funding under those schemes. And we usually develop a bid list that exceeds the allocation that's indicated on the basis that if other councils undersubscribe, the balance of the project fund or the pool for that year is redeployed amongst other subscribing councils. So sometimes we win and sometimes we only get the bare minimum of what we were entitled to.
Follow-up question. So if they give us a capacity, has this project been broken up to link in with the funding in those sort of that size chunks? Yeah,
we can develop project plans based on grant funding capacity. Of course, I know it's not 100% grant funded. It would require one-third municipal funds. So that could be considered in terms of the budget process overall.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any other questions? And assuming that there's no questions from the community, thank you. We have 10.2.2, consideration of tenders for the supply and laying of asphalt road surfacing. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Councillors, public and fellow City staff. This evening I would like to bring to your attention the consideration of tenders for the supply and laying of asphalt for road surfacing, which was the RFT 2010. The purpose of this report was for the consideration of tenders for the supply and laying of asphalt for road surfacing for the City of Kalamunda. Due to the nature of the works, given some consideration as to how the nature of the works may present itself, be it large-scale projects or ad hoc small portions, it was thought best that we should outsource this tender to a specialist that has all of the necessary plant and the experience to cater for such a variety of programmed work. The City issued RFT 2010 and the tender actually closed on May the 18th, 2020. We had 6 tender responses of varying natures, but all major construction companies. There were 4 compliant tenders that met or exceeded the qualitative price mark of 60% or more, and these 4 were then further assessed for price. In addition to both the qualitative criteria and price, the preferred tenderer underwent reference and independent financial checks, including that of probity, to provide the best value for money outcome and proven capacity and capability to meet the City's requirements and also the programme of works that we have ahead of us. Placing works of this nature under the contract for 3 years with the potential of 4th year is an effective and efficient process that guarantees value for money. The recommendation is that the Council accept the tender for the supply and laying of the asphalt road surfacing, RFT 2010, from Fulton Hogan Industries with the ACN 000538689. This is as per the schedule of rates set out in the confidential attachments 1 and 2 for a 3-year period from 28th of July 2020, with the option of a 1-year extension at the City of Kalamunda's discretion. Any questions?
Councillors, any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we move on to our 10.4 Office of the CEO reports, Community Sporting and Recreation Facility Funding Program.
Evening, councillors and members of the public. Purpose of the report tonight is to seek council to consider supporting 2 applications for external funding support through the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries program known as the Community Sporting and Recreation Facilities Fund. This is a state government administered program for local governments and sporting clubs to apply for funding assistance towards infrastructure. This report relates directly to their August 2020 small grants round, and it's for projects under $300,000 in value. So the first project application that we've got is the Kalamunda Lesmurdy Little Athletics Club. It's for an expansion to their storage area at Pat Moran Pavilion. This project was supported by the Strategic Sport and Recreation Committee and ranked as project number one. The SSRC recommended that funding be allocated in the city's 2021 budget, and also that a CSRFF application be submitted. CSRFF is the acronym for the Community Sporting and Recreation Facilities Fund. The main benefits of the project are to provide some security of tenure to the Little Athletics Club for their storage. It also provides a co-location opportunity within the existing users of Pat Moran Pavilion. Currently, the storage for the Little Athletics Club is located in quite a difficult position that doesn't quite necessarily allow good access for kids and parents to get the equipment out. And 3 user groups will also benefit from this project. It's estimated to cost just over $100,000. We're seeking funding support through the CSRFF program of 1/3 of that cost. The city contribution of $38,000 and the clubs are contributing $29,000. The second project is the Kalamunda Cricket Club. This was an application that we've recently received from the club. It's in relation to the installation of a synthetic cricket wicket at Costera. It hasn't been considered by the Strategic Sport and Rec Committee as it's being funded by the Kalamunda Cricket Club. And they'll be the main benefactors of this project. And the main benefits that they will receive will be in relation to being able to consolidate matches at one site and then also be able to host multiple games concurrently. It's estimated to cost $18,600. The club's contributing 2/3 of that cost and they're seeking 1/3 funding through the CSRFF program. So the officer recommendation is that council endorse the submission of those 2 CSRFF applications in the August small grants round and rank them in the priority order of the Kalamunda Lesmurdy Little Athletics Club being 1 and 2 the Kalamunda Cricket Club, and also note that an amount of $38,000 has been included in the budget for the Little Athletics Club. Questions?
Councillor Thomas.
The cricket club synthetic wicket, does that have a high maintenance cost in future years, and has that been looked at?
Through the chair, there is a maintenance cost involved with that particular project, and it's going to be considered through a deed of agreement that's currently being developed with all user groups.
Councillor Ritchie.
Through the chair, 2 questions. Firstly, has the football club given final approval for the synthetic wicket to be in place?
Yes, the club's given approval.
And secondly, is this grant including a turf covering for it in the non-cricket months?
The grant application does not. That's an operational cost that they don't meet as part of their grant criteria.
So therefore, if the money was to be granted, given the cricket, I understand the football club had given approval, provided that the wicket was covered with turf during the off-season. If they get the grant, where does the money come from to put the turf over it? And I understand that is at some significant cost each year. Where does the money come from for that annual ongoing covering of it with the turf?
Yep, the Kalamunda Cricket Club's provided written support that they would meet those ongoing costs.
Councillor Boyd.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy for you to take this question on notice because if required. Are you able to advise how many other pending submissions there is to the CSRFF for funding?
Just to clarify, Leslie, was that from the city or submitted to the state government?
How many submissions the CSRFF are considering, or the city's considering, I guess.
I'll take it on notice.
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor O'Connor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any reason why the cricket club didn't come to the city for assistance or a contribution?
Yep, thanks for the question, Dylan. They have definitely discussed the project with the city, but they decided to fund that themselves.
Councillors, any other questions? No. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, councillors.
Okay, that is all we have on the agenda for today. So we'll put mini briefing to closure at 19:43. Thank you everyone for attendance and interest.
Councillors, if you could also hold back, I think we've got a couple of